She screamed his name across the water, and he didn't turn around. Not because he didn't hear her, not because he didn't care, but because Caleb Holt, a United States Navy man and a single father of a 7-year-old girl, had spent years training himself to do the right thing, even when every nerve in his body told him otherwise. What happened at that resort pool on a Tuesday morning would shake both of them to the core and force Caleb to face the one battle the Navy never prepared him for: letting someone in. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. And if it hits you, subscribe, because this one's just getting started. The metal wrench slipped through Caleb Holt's fingers before he could catch it clanging hard against the concrete rim of the pool deck at 5:47 in the morning. He cursed under his breath, picked it up, and went right back to work. That was Caleb. No drama, no wasted motion, just the job. The Solera Grand Resort sat on the edge of the Mojave like someone had dropped a 5-star hotel in the middle of nowhere and forgot to tell the desert. Palm trees that didn't belong there. Turquoise water that gleamed even before the sun got fully out of bed. And at this hour, before the guests woke up, before the Instagram influencers started staking out their lounge chairs, it was quiet. It was his. Caleb liked that. He crouched beside the main filtration housing, his forearm pressed flat against the warm concrete, his eyes scanning the intake valve that had been giving him trouble for 3 days straight. He'd already filed 2 maintenance reports. The resort's head of facilities, a man named Gerald, who wore too much cologne and not enough competence, had told him twice that a part was on order. On order. Caleb had spent 11 years in the United States Navy. He'd fixed machinery on vessels in the middle of the Pacific with nothing but a multi-tool and sheer stubbornness. Gerald's on order meant exactly nothing to him. So he improvised. He always did. His hands moved with that practiced automatic calm, the kind of calm that doesn't come from being easygoing. It comes from discipline, from choosing over and over again to hold the line when everything inside you wants to break. Caleb was 38 years old, and he looked like a man who had lived 45. Not in a bad way, in the way that says this one has been through something real. His jaw was set. His eyes, dark brown sharp, didn't miss much, and his hands, scarred lightly from years of work on deck and at home, moved with a kind of quiet authority. He had 2 jobs, and he was proud of both of them. The first was the Navy. He was still active reserve, still committed. Still the man who had memorized every regulation and outperformed every expectation that had ever been set for him. The second was Zara, 7 years old, gap-toothed grin, obsessed with dinosaurs and grilled cheese sandwiches. The single most important human being on the face of this earth as far as Caleb was concerned. The resort job. The early mornings, the pool filters, the occasional broken tile or malfunctioning pump, that was for Zara too. It was the extra layer of security. The difference between "we'll be okay" and "we're going to be fine." He didn't need the money to survive. He needed it so that Zara never had to feel the difference. He had been doing that for 3 years now. Since the divorce. He didn't talk about the divorce. Not with Gerald. Not with the other maintenance guys. Not with anyone, really. It had happened. It had been painful. In the way that a deep cut is painful. Sharp at first, then dull, then eventually something you forget about until you press on it wrong. He'd walked away from it with sole custody of Zara and a quiet iron commitment to rebuild. And that's what he did. Every single morning before the resort woke up, before the world demanded anything from him, Caleb Holt showed up and did the work. He didn't need applause for it. He didn't need anyone to notice. He heard her before he saw her. There was a soft sound, not quite a splash, more like someone slipping into the water with the careful deliberateness of someone trying not to make a scene. The lap lane at the far end of the pool. Early morning swimmer, not unusual. Caleb didn't look up. He had a filtration cap in one hand and a worn-out gasket in the other, and he was about 30 seconds from getting this seal seated correctly if he could just... There. He pressed the gasket into place, felt it catch, and allowed himself a small exhale. Behind him, the swimmer moved through the water in clean, even strokes. Caleb could track the sound without looking. Years of situational awareness made that automatic. Whoever it was, they were good. Steady rhythm. Controlled breathing. No splashing. He reached for his wrench. And that's when he heard it. A sharp crack, metallic, sudden, followed immediately by a quick intake of breath. Not a gasp of pain. More like a person realizing in real time that something had just gone very wrong. Caleb's hand stopped on the wrench. He knew that sound. It was the bracket on Lane 4's starting block. He'd flagged it in his second maintenance report 3 weeks ago. The bolt had been stripping. The whole mount was unstable. He'd recommended it be taken out of service until it was repaired. Gerald had said it was on the list. He closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. Then he heard the voice. Oh no. He knew that voice. Caleb Holt had known Leah Monroe for 6 years. She'd moved into the house across the street 2 months after he and his ex-wife had bought their place back when things were still good, back when he'd still believed in the version of himself that came home and had dinner at the table and laughed at things. Leah had brought over a casserole because that's what Leah did. She was the kind of woman who showed up. She was organized, capable, and ran a regional marketing division for a hospitality brand out of a home office that was more professionally equipped than most corporate suites Caleb had seen. She was also, as it turned out, one of the only people who had consistently showed up for him and Zara after the divorce, without making him feel like a charity case. She never pushed. She never asked questions he wasn't ready to answer. She just was there. An extra set of eyes on Zara when he got pulled in for a last-minute reserve call-out. A steady voice on the other end of the phone when a pipe burst at 11 p.m. and he didn't know who else to call. He owed her more than he would ever say out loud. He also hadn't known she was a member of this resort, or that she swam here, or that she was in that pool right now behind him. Oh no, she said again, quieter this time, and there was something under the surface of those 2 small words that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Caleb crouched lower over the filtration housing. He didn't move. He didn't turn around, because he was already certain of what had happened. The starting block bracket had given way. And based on the sound, the angle of the crack, the follow-through, or rather, the lack of follow-through, he was fairly certain that whatever had been holding Leah's swimsuit strap or top together had not survived the contact. He understood that immediately, with the same clear-eyed clarity with which he assessed a malfunctioning engine or a structural issue on a vessel. And he made a decision. He was not going to look. Not because it was awkward, not because he was embarrassed, because Leah Monroe deserved better than a moment of vulnerability becoming someone else's reaction to manage. She was a private person. A composed person. A person who in 6 years of friendship had never once let him see her rattled, and he was not going to be the reason that changed. He reached up without turning and pulled the clean maintenance towel off the equipment rail. He held it out behind him, arm extended, his eyes fixed on the pump housing in front of him. "Take your time, Leah," he said. His voice was even, steady, like he was commenting on the weather. "I'm not looking." A long silence. The water moved. He kept his arm extended. Her voice was almost nothing. "Thank you." He waited. He stayed exactly where he was. He counted the seconds without meaning to, the way he always did in high-pressure situations, not from anxiety, but from training. 1, 2, 3. "Caleb." "Yeah." "How did you know it was me?" "I know your stroke," he said simply. 4 laps. Clean pull on the left. Slight pause on the right side breath. "You've been swimming since high school." Another silence. "I didn't know you could hear that. I hear most things," he said. "Doesn't mean I have to react to all of them." He heard the faint rustle of the towel being pulled from his hand. He let it go. He turned back to the pump housing and picked up his wrench. Behind him, Leah moved toward the pool steps. And then, so quietly, he almost didn't catch it, almost thought he'd imagined it. "Please, don't go." Caleb's hand stopped on the wrench. He didn't move. He didn't turn around. But something shifted in his chest, something old and sealed and kept behind a very particular door, and he felt it move. He finished the job. He always finished the job. By the time the sun was fully up and the resort's groundskeeping crew was starting their rounds, Caleb had the filtration system sealed, the intake valve functioning correctly, and a written note left on Gerald's desk about the Lane 4 bracket that was no longer a recommendation, but a demand. He used the exact language the Navy had taught him for maintenance non-compliance. Gerald would not enjoy reading it. Caleb walked to his truck, put his toolbox in the bed, and sat in the driver's seat for a moment without starting the engine. He thought about the way she'd said it. "Please, don't go." 3 words, barely audible. Not like Leah at all. Leah, who was composed and direct and never said anything she didn't mean to say, never showed anything she didn't intend to show. He pressed his palms flat against the steering wheel. It wasn't what he thought it was. He knew that. It wasn't it wasn't about him necessarily. It was a moment of vulnerability, a woman caught off guard, and she'd reached for the nearest anchor. That was all. He told himself that very firmly. Then his phone buzzed. He looked down at the screen. Leah Monroe. "Can we talk?" "Not about this morning. I mean, about this morning." "But not the way you're thinking. Are you free this afternoon?" Caleb read it twice. He typed back, "Yes." He started the engine. He picked Zara up from school at 3:15, the same way he always did 5 minutes early, parked in the second spot from the end of the pickup lane so she could see his truck from the classroom door without having to look too hard. He had done that every single day for 3 years. It wasn't a big thing. Zara had never once commented on it. But he knew she looked for him. He knew the exact shape of the relief on her face when she spotted the truck, and he had made a promise to himself that she would never have to look and not find it. She climbed in with her dinosaur backpack, buckled her seatbelt, and immediately began telling him about a conflict she'd had with a boy named Marcus over who got to be the Triceratops in a game at recess, and why she had been right, and Marcus had been objectively, categorically wrong. Caleb listened. He asked the right questions. He laughed at the right moments. And when he dropped her at his neighbor Mrs. Calloway's for the hour he needed, because he'd promised Leah he'd come, and because he was a man who kept promises, he watched Zara run up the porch steps and didn't move until she was inside, and the door was closed. Then he drove to the resort. Leah's office was on the second floor of the administrative wing. It was neat, efficient, and exactly what you'd expect from a woman who ran a regional division from a home office, and made it look effortless. She had actual plants on the windowsill, not fake ones, actual living ones, and a corkboard on the wall filled with project timelines and post-it notes in 4 different colors. She was seated when he walked in. She looked up immediately. She looked tired, not physically tired, something deeper than that, the kind of tired that comes from carrying something for a long time without putting it down. "Hey," she said. "Hey," he said. He sat across from her. He didn't fill the silence with small talk, because he never did, and she knew him well enough not to expect it. She folded her hands on the desk. "This morning," she started, then stopped, tried again. "When the bracket broke, I wasn't hurt. I want to say that first. I'm fine." "I know you're fine," he said. "I would have turned around if you weren't." Something moved across her face. "Would you?" "Yes." No hesitation. No hesitation. She looked at him steadily. "See, that's the thing, Caleb. That's exactly the thing." She paused. "Most men would have turned around, and you know what, I wouldn't have blamed them. It would have been a reflex, a human reflex. But you didn't." She shook her head slightly. "You didn't even almost turn around. You already knew what I needed before I could even figure it out myself." Caleb shifted in the chair. He wasn't comfortable with this. He didn't say so. "It wasn't complicated," he said. "You needed space. I gave you space, that's all." "That's not all." Her voice was firm now. "Caleb, I have worked in hospitality for 15 years. I have been in rooms with powerful people, charming people, impressive people. And I want you to understand what I'm saying to me here." She looked at him directly. "What you did this morning, looking away, holding out that towel, staying exactly where you were, do you know how rare that is?" He said nothing. "You didn't make it about you," she said. "You didn't make it about what you saw, or what you didn't see, or what it meant, or how it looked. You just responded to what I needed, quietly, without asking for anything back." Caleb felt something tighten in his chest. He pushed it down the way he always did. "Leah, I'm not done." She wasn't harsh about it, just clear. "I need to say this because I've been thinking about it all day, and I think if I don't say it to your face, I'm going to lose the nerve." She took a breath. You've been doing that for 3 years, Caleb. Since the divorce. You've been showing up for Zara, for your work, for your neighbors, for me, and you do it so quietly that I don't think anyone, including you, stops to recognize what it actually is. The office was very still. What is it? He asked. His voice came out lower than he intended. Leah looked at him. It's integrity, she said. The kind that doesn't need an audience. The silence stretched out between them, not uncomfortable, just full. The way silence gets when someone says the truest version of a true thing. Caleb looked down at his hands. The same hands that had fixed the filtration valve at 5 in the morning. The same hands that had held out a towel without looking. The same hands that rested on Zara's shoulders when she was scared. I don't know what to do with that, he admitted. Leah gave him a small, careful smile. You don't have to do anything with it. That's kind of the point. He stayed for another 20 minutes. They talked about other things. Zara's obsession with Triceratops. Gerald's incompetence, a problem Leah was having with a vendor contract. Normal things, safe things. But when he stood to leave, he paused at the door. Leah? Yeah? I heard you, he said. In the pool. When you said... He stopped. Looked at her. I heard you. I want you to know that. She held his gaze for a moment. I know you did, she said. That's why I said it. Gichata. He drove home through the amber late afternoon light with all the windows down, and he didn't turn on the radio, and he didn't think about what came next, and he let the desert air fill the cab of his truck and push everything else to the edges for just a moment. When he turned onto his street, he could already see the light in Mrs. Calloway's front window. He could picture Zara in there, probably talking too fast about dinosaurs, probably eating whatever snack Mrs. Calloway had offered, and trying to negotiate a second. He parked. He sat. He thought about what Leah had said. Integrity. The kind that doesn't need an audience. He'd never thought of it that way. He'd just thought of it as doing what you were supposed to do. Because someone had to. Because Zara needed him to. Because no one else was going to. But maybe that was enough. Maybe that was the thing. He got out of the truck and walked up the porch steps. And when Mrs. Calloway opened the door, and Zara came barreling out with her gap-toothed grin and her dinosaur backpack and a half-eaten graham cracker in her hand, yelling, Dad, I taught Mrs. Calloway about the Cretaceous period, and she didn't even know what a Pachycephalosaurus was. Caleb Holt caught his daughter and held her, and he laughed a real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere deep and unguarded. And the door that had been sealed shut for 3 years shifted slightly on its hinges. Not open. Not yet. But shifted. The next morning, Caleb was back at the pool at 5:44 a.m., not because he had to be. The filtration system was running clean. The Lane 4 bracket had been officially taken out of service. Gerald had left him a voicemail about it that was equal parts defensive and vaguely threatening, and Caleb had deleted it before it finished playing. Everything that needed fixing had been fixed. He was there because he didn't know what else to do with the feeling that had been sitting in his chest since yesterday, and work was the only reliable cure he'd ever found for feelings he didn't have a name for yet. He checked the chemical levels. He inspected the pump seals. He walked the perimeter of the deck with a flashlight, even though the sky was already starting to pale at the edges. He was thorough in the way a man is thorough when he's trying very hard not to think about something specific. It didn't work. I heard you. When you said, he'd said that to her. He'd actually said that. He, Caleb Holt, who had spent 3 years carefully and systematically eliminating any behavior that could be interpreted as needing something from another person, he had stood in the doorway of her office and told her he had heard her and that he wanted her to know it. He crouched beside the pool's edge and looked at the water. It was still, perfectly still. The kind of still that only exists before the world starts moving. He pressed the back of his wrist against his jaw and exhaled through his nose. The problem wasn't what he'd said. The problem was that he'd meant it, every word of it. And he wasn't sure at 5:44 in the morning, with nobody watching, what that actually meant for the careful, controlled, Zara-centered life he'd spent 3 years building. His phone buzzed in his breast pocket. He pulled it out. Leah Monroe. Are you at the resort right now? He stared at the message. How do you know that? He typed back. Because your truck is in the lot and it's not even 6 a.m. and Gerald definitely didn't call you in. Are you okay? He looked up from his phone toward the parking lot, even though the administrative wing wasn't visible from here. He had a sudden irrational image of Leah standing at a window up there watching his truck, and something about that image did something strange to the architecture of his chest. "I'm fine," he typed. Routine check. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Caleb. Just his name. Nothing else. The way she said it when she wasn't buying something. He put the phone in his pocket without responding and stood up. He gathered his kit. He walked back to his truck. He did not look up at the administrative wing. He made Zara's breakfast at 7:15, the same way he did every morning. Scrambled eggs, wheat toast, orange juice poured to exactly the line she'd marked on the inside of the glass with a permanent marker because she said anything less wasn't enough, and anything more made her feel rushed. She had opinions about everything Zara did. She got that from him, though he'd never said so out loud. She sat at the kitchen table with a library book about the Jurassic period open beside her plate, reading and eating simultaneously in a way that should have been difficult to manage, but that she executed with complete confidence. "Dad," she said without looking up from the book. "Yeah, baby." "Did you know that Allosaurus was actually bigger than T-Rex? Like in some ways, people always think T-Rex was the biggest, but that's actually not completely accurate." "I did not know that," he said, which was true. "Marcus doesn't believe me." She turned a page. "But I'm going to show him the book today, and then he'll have to believe me, because it's a library book, and library books are always accurate." "That's solid logic," Caleb said. "I know." She picked up a piece of toast. "Are you working the pool today?" "Not until this afternoon." "Can we have dinner together?" "Absolutely." She looked up at him. Then her big dark eyes, his eyes exactly sharp and full of things she was always busy processing. "Can we have grilled cheese?" "We can have grilled cheese." She nodded satisfied and went back to the book. Caleb stood at the kitchen counter and watched his daughter eat breakfast and read about dinosaurs, and he thought, this is everything. This is the whole thing. Right here. He believed that completely. He had believed it for 3 years. He still believed it. He just couldn't stop thinking about what Leah had said. He ran into her at 2:30 in the afternoon, not at the resort and not by design, but in the parking lot of the hardware store on Ridgeline Road, which was the kind of thing that happened when you lived 3 houses apart and shared a zip code in a town that wasn't quite big enough to get lost in. She was loading a box into the back of her car. He was carrying a replacement gasket set and trying to decide whether to acknowledge her or just give a wave and keep moving, because he was still figuring out the geography of whatever yesterday's conversation had rearranged between them. He gave the wave. She said, "Caleb, come here." He came. She was wearing jeans and a plain blue shirt, and her hair was pulled back, and she looked like a person who had also spent the morning thinking about something they hadn't resolved. She closed the back of her car and turned to face him. "I think I made you uncomfortable yesterday," she said. Not an apology, an observation. "You didn't," he said. "I think I did." "Leah, you don't have to protect me from it," she said. "I said some things that were direct and personal, and I put them on you without warning. That's on me." She met his eyes. "I just need to know that we're okay. You and me. That I didn't—" She stopped. Started again. "I value what we have, Caleb. Whatever it is. And I don't want one conversation to make it weird." He looked at her for a moment. "It's not weird," he said. "You sure, Leah? I have navigated active deployment zones with less anxiety than I'm apparently generating in a parking lot right now. I promise you I'm fine." Something loosened in her expression. The ghost of a smile. "That is the most Navy thing you have ever said to me." "I have said many Navy things to you. You have. The one about Gerald and the maintenance report being a documented non-compliance failure is still my personal favorite." The almost smile became an actual one, brief and real. "I just wanted to check in." "You checked in," he said. "We're okay." She nodded. Started to turn toward her car door, then stopped. "Are you going to ask me why I was at the pool at 5:45 in the morning? I figured you had a reason." "I did." She leaned against the car. Her tone shifted slightly, still steady, but the surface of it changed. I've been having a hard time sleeping. For about 2 months now. The work stuff there's a contract situation that's taking longer than it should, and I keep waking up at 4 a.m., running numbers in my head. So I started going to the pool before the world woke up because it's the only place where I can get my brain to stop. Caleb listened, and yesterday when the bracket broke, she paused. I wasn't scared about the bracket. I've handled worse. But for just a second before I got it together, I felt completely... She searched for the word. Exposed. Not just physically. Like everything I'd been holding together for the past 2 months was just sitting right on the surface where anyone could see it. And then I didn't look, he said. And then you didn't look. She nodded slowly. And I know it sounds strange, but that was the kindest thing anyone has done for me in a very long time. Caleb shifted the gasket set in his hands. He didn't say anything right away because he had learned through years of being the wrong kind of quiet, and having to relearn how to be the right kind, that sometimes the most important response to something true is simply to let it land. 2 months is a long time to not sleep, he said finally. Yeah. Is the contract situation going to resolve? It will. She crossed her arms. It's not catastrophic. It's just the kind of thing that sits on you. You know, the slow grind. The thing that doesn't announce itself as a crisis, so you feel like you're not supposed to talk about it. He understood that. He understood it in a cellular, bone-deep way that he couldn't have explained to a stranger, but that Leah apparently already saw. You can talk about it, he said. To you, to me. She looked at him. Really looked at him the way she had in her office, like she was checking something, verifying something, making sure she was seeing what she thought she was seeing. Okay, she said. Maybe I will. She opened her car door. Caleb, she said before getting in. For what it's worth, I meant what I said. About the integrity thing. I know it's not the kind of compliment you know what to do with, but I meant it. I know you did, he said. Good. She got in the car. Tell Zara I said hi. She'll want to talk to you about Pachycephalosaurus. I genuinely don't know what that is. She'll explain it, at length. Leah laughed, a real one, short and surprised, and the sound of it did something that Caleb filed under. Don't think about this right now, and drove home in the long way around. He made grilled cheese for dinner. Zara stood on the step stool beside him at the stove supervising. She took the supervision role very seriously. More butter, she said. There's already butter, Zara. There's not enough butter. Grandma always uses more butter. Grandma's cholesterol is a cautionary tale. I don't know what that means. It means we're using this amount of butter. She considered this. Okay, she said in the tone of someone granting a significant concession. But I want mine extra crispy. I know you want yours extra crispy. I have been making your grilled cheese for 3 years. I am aware of the crispiness preference. I'm just reminding you. Your reminders are always very helpful. She was quiet for a moment, watching the sandwich in the pan, with the focused intensity of a scientist observing an experiment. Then she said, Is Miss Leah okay? Caleb glanced at her. Why? I saw her car in the driveway this morning, but she wasn't in her yard. She always waves at me when I walk to the bus. She was at work early, he said. She's fine. Did something happen? Why would something have happened? Zara shrugged with that particular 7-year-old nonchalance that was never actually nonchalant. I don't know, you just got that face. What face? The one you get when something happened, but you're deciding how to say it. Caleb looked at his daughter. She was still watching the sandwich, her chin barely clearing the edge of the stove, utterly calm. He made a mental note that 7-year-olds were significantly more perceptive than they had any right to be. She's fine, he said. She's going through something at work, but she's handling it. Is she sad? I don't think sad is the word. What's the word to tired, he said. The kind of tired that's not about sleep. Zara thought about this. Like when you came home from the deployment and you didn't want to watch TV for a week. He hadn't known she remembered that. She'd been 4. Something like that, he said carefully. She reached up and patted his forearm in a way that was so unconsciously maternal that it physically winded him for a second. We should make her something, Zara said. Like, bring her dinner or something. Because that's what you do when someone has that kind of tired. Caleb turned the sandwich. Since when is that a rule? Since always. Mrs. Calloway brought us soup when you were gone that one time, and you always say you pay kindness forward. He stared at the pan. He always said that. He flipped the sandwich, let it crisp, transferred it to Zara's plate, cut it diagonally because she would not accept it cut any other way. Yeah, he said, we can do that. Tomorrow, she asked immediately, with the negotiating instincts of someone who knew that yes, eventually, and yes, tomorrow were very different answers. Tomorrow, he confirmed. She picked up her grilled cheese and took a satisfied bite. Good, she said through the food which he was technically supposed to correct her for. He didn't. He put her to bed at 8:30, sat on the edge of the mattress while she told him 3 things she'd learned about the Cretaceous period and 1 thing she hadn't liked about lunch. And then he turned out the light and stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to the specific quiet of a sleeping child, which was different from regular quiet, fuller, somehow, more certain, and he thought about how he had built this entire life out of that sound. He went to the kitchen, made coffee, sat at the table. He thought about what Leah had said in the parking lot. 2 months is a long time to carry something without saying it's a crisis. He knew that territory. He had been the mayor of that territory for most of his adult life. He thought about the way she'd looked at the pool, the way her voice had stripped itself down to almost nothing. Please, don't go. He hadn't gone. He wouldn't have gone. That wasn't a decision he'd had to make, it was just who he was. But something else was happening now. Something that was less about who he was, and more about what that meant going forward for the borders he'd drawn around himself after the divorce. The careful, sensible, thoroughly justified borders. His phone was on the table. He looked at it. He picked it up. He opened the thread with Leah Monroe. He typed, Zara wants to bring you dinner tomorrow. She said it's what you do when someone has that kind of tired. I'm aware that she's 7 and I'm using her as cover for the fact that I agree with her. Let me know if that's okay. He read it twice. He sent it. He put the phone face down on the table and drank his coffee. 40 seconds later, the phone buzzed. He turned it over. That might be the most honest thing you've ever texted me. He looked at that for a moment. Then he typed back, Don't tell anyone. I have a reputation. Huh? What time? 6:30, if that works. That works. Tell Zara I'm looking forward to it. She'll probably bring a book about dinosaurs. I'll try to have questions ready. He set the phone down again. He sat in the kitchen for another 20 minutes, drinking his coffee in the quiet of a house where his daughter was sleeping, and the world outside was settling into the kind of dark that comes before anything new begins. He wasn't thinking about the divorce anymore. He wasn't calculating risks or reinforcing borders, or doing any of the things he'd trained himself to do when something got too close. He was just sitting. For the first time in a long time, just sitting felt like something approaching enough. He washed his cup, turned off the kitchen light, and went to bed. Zara changed her outfit 3 times before 6:30. Caleb stood in the hallway outside her bedroom door and listened to the sound of dresser drawers opening and closing with escalating urgency and said nothing, because he had learned that commenting on this process only extended it. He was holding a covered casserole dish, chicken and rice, the one thing he could make reliably and in volume. And he was wearing a clean shirt which was as much effort as he was willing to admit he'd made. Dad, Zara called from behind the door. Yeah, is it okay to wear the purple one if it has a small stain on the sleeve? Where's the stain? Near the cuff. But it's really small. You can barely see it. Is it noticeable? A pause. Only if you're looking. Then don't do anything with your sleeves and it'll be fine. Another pause. A drawer closed. Then, okay, I'm ready. She came out in the purple shirt with her hair brushed and her favorite sneakers on, carrying her library book about the Cretaceous period tucked under her arm like it was a briefcase. She looked at the casserole dish in his hands with a critical eye. Did you put enough salt in it this time? Zara. Last time you said it was fine and it was not fine. It was fine. Mrs. Calloway said it needed salt. Mrs. Calloway put salt on everything including fruit. She is not a reliable benchmark. Zara accepted this with the measured dignity of someone choosing not to argue a point she was going to revisit later. She looked up at him. "Ready?" "Ready," he said. They walked across the street together in the early evening, Zara matching his pace the way she always did. 2 quick steps for every one of her book tucked against her ribs. Her sneakers lit up orange and pink with each step, because she had insisted on the light-up ones, even though she was 7. And technically she had informed him, "There's no age limit on light-up sneakers, Dad, that's not a thing." He had not been able to argue with that either. Leah's front door opened before they reached the porch. She was in jeans and a gray cardigan, her hair down, and she looked different. Softer somehow at the edges. Like she'd put down something heavy between the parking lot yesterday and right now. "Look at you two," she said. "I brought a book," Zara announced. "About the Cretaceous period. Dad said you might have questions." He was right. Leah stepped back to let them in. "I actually thought of one already." Zara's eyes widened. "Already?" "I Googled some things." Zara looked up at Caleb with an expression that could only be described as deeply impressed. He gave her a small nod and carried the casserole dish to the kitchen. Leah's house was tidy and lived in, the kind of clean that comes from actually using a space rather than staging it. There were work files on the dining room table pushed to one side to make room, and a candle on the kitchen counter that smelled like cedar, and evidence of someone who had been trying deliberately to make the evening feel intentional. He set the dish on the stove. "You didn't have to make something," Leah said, coming into the kitchen behind him. "Zara's orders," he said. "I'm right here," Zara called from the living room, where she had apparently already settled herself on the couch with her book open. "She has good instincts," Leah said quietly to Caleb. "She really does," he said. "It's slightly terrifying." Leah smiled, that real one, the brief and unguarded one he was starting to be able to distinguish from the professional version. She reached past him to open the cabinet where she kept the plates, and for a second they were standing closer together than they usually were. The kitchen being what it was, and he was acutely aware of that, in a way he immediately decided not to examine. He stepped to the side. She got the plates. "How's the contract situation?" he asked, because it was the right question, and because it moved them onto ground he knew how to stand on. "Better, actually." She set 3 plates on the counter. "I had a call this afternoon with the vendor's legal team, and I think we found a path through it. Nothing's signed yet, but the logjam is breaking." She opened a drawer for silverware. It felt like finally being able to exhale. "Good. Yeah." She handed him a serving spoon. "Sleep might happen tonight." That would be a reasonable development. From the living room, "Miss Leah, my question is ready when you are." Leah raised an eyebrow at Caleb. "She's been holding it since we left the house," he said. Dinner lasted an hour and 45 minutes, which was 45 minutes longer than Caleb had planned, and which he did not mind even slightly. Zara had, true to form, taken the question Leah had prepared something about whether Brachiosaurus was actually herbivorous, and turned it into a full educational session that covered 3 distinct geological periods. The disputed taxonomy of at least 2 dinosaur species, and a detailed explanation of why the Jurassic Park films were, in Zara's words, scientifically irresponsible but still pretty good. Leah had listened to all of it with the kind of genuine attention that Caleb had only ever seen her give to things she actually cared about. She asked follow-up questions. She pushed back in the right places. She let Zara correct her twice without making the correction feel like anything other than a gift. Caleb watched this from across the table and ate his chicken and rice and said almost nothing, and felt something settle in him that he hadn't known was unsettled. After dinner, while Zara was in the living room reorganizing Leah's bookshelf by a better system she had invented on the spot, Caleb cleared the table, and Leah washed dishes, and they moved around each other in the kitchen with a comfortable ease that probably should have taken years to develop, but apparently hadn't. "She's remarkable," Leah said, handing him a rinsed plate to dry. "I know." "You do know, right? Like you actually know, not just in the way that parents say they know." He looked at her sideways. "I know. Because some parents are so close to it they can't see it clearly." She handed him another plate. "But she's genuinely the way she thinks, Caleb. The way she argues a point. She's going to be formidable." "She already is." "She gets it from you." He dried the plate. "I was going to say the same thing about her arguing style, actually." Leah laughed. It was easy unself-conscious. She absolutely does not get it from you. You don't argue, you just make a statement and wait for everyone else to figure out that you're right. That's arguing. It really isn't. It works. That's what makes it aggravating. But she was still smiling when she said it. They finished the dishes in comfortable quiet for a moment. Then Leah said, without looking at him, "Thank you for coming. I know you had to arrange things. With Mrs. Calloway or—" "We came from home," he said. Zara was done with homework by 5. It wasn't complicated. Still, she turned off the faucet, dried her hands. It mattered. He put the last dish in the drying rack and turned to lean against the counter facing her. "Leah, can I ask you something?" She turned to face him too. She had the composed look, but the edges of it were open. "Yeah. The 2 months you mentioned. The bad sleep, the contract wait." He looked at her directly. "Is that all it is? Or is there something else going on that I should know about?" She was quiet for a moment. Not the kind of quiet that means someone is deciding whether to tell you something. The kind that means they're deciding how. "My mother called in August," she said. "She's been having some health things. Nothing definitive yet, they're still running tests. But she's up in Oregon, and I've been trying to figure out when I can get there. And the contract situation made it hard to step away, and She stopped. "I keep telling myself I'll go next month, and then next month comes." Caleb said nothing. He just listened. "And I know that's something I have to handle," she continued. "I'm not looking for you to fix it. I haven't said that out loud to anyone yet. The whole thing. And then you asked, and—" She pulled in a breath. "There it is. When's the last time you were in Oregon?" "Christmas, 7 months ago. Can you go next week?" She blinked. The contract's moving. You said the logjam is breaking. Next week." "Caleb, it's not that simple." "Leah." He said her name the same way she said his, without force, but with weight. "You just told me you've been pushing it to next month for 7 months. At some point next month has to be next week." She looked at him. Her expression did something complicated. "I know," she said. "I know you know," he said. "I'm just saying it out loud, since apparently that helps." She was quiet for a second. Then she said, "You're very annoying when you're right." "I've heard that. I bet you have." She exhaled. "I'll look at flights tonight." "Good." She looked at him, and the complicated expression settled into something simpler. "You always do that." "Do what?" "Cut through to the thing, without all the extra around it. Most people, when you tell them something like that, they say, 'Oh, I'm sure it'll be fine,' or they pivot to talking about their own mother, or they give you a list of things you should try. You just—" She shook her head slightly. "You just go straight to the actual thing. The actual thing is the only useful part." "I know. But most people are afraid of the actual thing." He considered that. "What are they afraid of? That they won't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he said. "You just have to go to Oregon." She laughed again, shorter this time, almost despite herself. "I'm going to Oregon, Caleb." "Good." He straightened up from the counter. "Zara," he called toward the living room. "1 second," she yelled back. "I'm almost done with the books." He looked at Leah. "I apologize in advance for whatever system she's invented. I'm sure it'll be very logical and completely unusable." "That's exactly right." They left at 8:15. Zara had reorganized approximately 40% of Leah's bookshelf by emotional weight of ending before Caleb had redirected her, and Leah had taken a photo of the section Zara had finished and declared she was keeping it that way. On the walk back across the street, Zara was quiet for almost half a block, which was notable enough that Caleb glanced down at her. "What's turning?" he asked. She looked up. "What? In your head, what's turning?" She thought about it for a second. "I think Miss Leah is lonely," she said. Caleb walked. "Not in a sad way." Zara continued, working it out as she said it. "More like she has everything all put together, but she doesn't have anyone to sit with." He didn't say anything right away. "You think that's right?" he asked. "I think so." She looked up at him. Are you lonely, Dad? It was the kind of question that would have landed differently 3 years ago, or even 3 days ago. Right now, it just landed cleanly with no defense mechanism rising up to intercept it. Sometimes, he said. Yeah. She nodded like this was an answer she'd already factored in. I think you and Miss Leah should be friends more. We are friends. I mean more friends, she said with the precision of someone who found the distinction obvious. Like how you and Mr. Delgado from the base get dinner sometimes, real friends. Mr. Delgado and I have served together for 8 years. So you should start now with Miss Leah then. She said it with complete reasonableness. You have to start somewhere. Caleb opened the front door and let her through. Go brush your teeth, he said. I'm right though, she said over her shoulder, heading for the stairs. He stood in the doorway for one more second and looked across the street at Leah's house. The front light was on. He could see the faint blue glow of a laptop screen through the front window. She was already looking at flights probably. Doing the thing she'd been putting off for 7 months because someone had said it out loud in the right way at the right time. He closed the door. The call came at 7:22 the next morning. He was in the middle of getting Zara ready for school. She had declared that her preferred sneakers were not where she'd left them, which they never were, which was always urgent, and always his problem, for reasons that had never been fully explained, when his phone rang with a number he recognized immediately. His commanding officer's direct line. He took the call in the hallway. Holt. Commander Reyes's voice was brisk professional, with an undercurrent that Caleb had learned over 9 years to read accurately. This undercurrent said, "This is not a routine call." Sir, Caleb said, I need you available for a readiness briefing Friday. There's something developing, and I want my reserve officers in the room. I'll be there. It may go longer than a briefing. A pause. I can't say more on this line. You understand? Yes, sir. How's your daughter's situation? Do you have coverage? The question was routine. Reyes was thorough, like that always accounting for the human logistics, but it sat on Caleb with a different weight this morning than it might have 2 days ago. Coverage. He had Mrs. Calloway. He had a network he'd carefully assembled for exactly these moments. He'd always had it covered. I'll sort it, sir, he said. Good man. Friday, 0900. The call ended. Caleb stood in the hallway for a moment with his phone in his hand. From upstairs came the sound of Zara moving furniture which he chose not to investigate. Something developing. That could mean a dozen things. It could mean a 3-hour briefing and a handshake. It could mean something else entirely. He had learned not to speculate. He had learned to wait for the actual information and then respond to that, not to the shape of his own anxiety about it. Still, he heard it. The low hum underneath everything. The one that said you are a Navy man first. You have always been a Navy man first. Found them, Zara yelled from upstairs. Great, he called back. Shoes on, 2 minutes. He put his phone in his pocket and went to the bottom of the stairs and waited for his daughter to come down. And he thought about Friday. And he thought about what Reyes hadn't said. And he thought about Mrs. Calloway's availability. And he thought about the careful load-bearing structure of his life. And how every element in it had been chosen and placed and verified. Then he thought about Leah's front light. The blue glow of a laptop. Flights to Oregon. You have to start somewhere. He pulled out his phone again, opened the thread. Heads up. I may need some flexibility with coverage this Friday. Reserve briefing. Not sure of the duration yet. I know you're also navigating timing with the Oregon trip, so let me know if the Friday timing affects you, and I'll figure out an alternative plan with Mrs. Calloway. He read it back. It was practical, direct. The kind of message he'd sent 100 times in different configurations. He added, also, did you look at flights? He sent both. He put the phone away. Zara came down the stairs with both shoes on her backpack secured and her library book under her arm again. I'm returning this today, she informed him, holding up the book. I have the next one on reserve. It's about the Permian extinction event. Mrs. Cooper says I'm the first third grader who's ever put a hold on a paleontology book. Mrs. Cooper's never met you before, he said. Zara considered this. That's true. She headed for the door. Come on, Dad, you'll make me late. He was not going to make her late. He was never going to make her late. But he followed her out the door, and he locked the house behind him, and he walked her to the bus stop with 5 minutes to spare, and when the bus came, and she got on without looking back, because she never looked back, she was like him in that way too. He stood on the sidewalk and watched it go. His phone buzzed. "Leah, Friday is fine. I'll be here. And yes, I found flights. I'm going to Oregon on the 14th. He looked at that for a moment. Then he typed back, "Good, just that." One word. Her response came fast. "I know. You don't have to say anything else." He almost smiled. Almost. He pocketed his phone and started the walk back to the house, and the morning was still and dry and full of things that hadn't happened yet, and something in the way all of it sat on him. The briefing. The Oregon trip. Zara's bus going around the corner. The word good on a screen felt less like weight and more like the specific gravity of a life that was being lived in full. He wasn't sure when that had shifted. He was fairly sure he knew why. Friday came in fast and hard, the way important things always do. Like the week between the call and the morning of had been moving at normal speed, and then suddenly compressed into nothing. Caleb was up at 4:30. Not because he needed to be. The base was 40 minutes out, and the briefing wasn't until 9, which meant he had more time than he needed, and he spent the extra hour doing the things he always did when something uncertain was coming. He made sure everything around him was in order. He checked the kitchen. He set out Zara's breakfast things. He confirmed with Mrs. Calloway via text at 5 a.m. She was awake. She always was. She'd told him once that she hadn't slept past 5 since 1987, and had made peace with it. And he laid out Zara's school clothes on the chair in her room without waking her. The same way his own father had done for him before early mornings, when there was no time for the usual routine. He stood in the door of her room for a moment in the dark. She was on her side, her hair across the pillow. One arm wrapped around the stuffed triceratops she'd named Gerald, not after the resort's head of facilities, but the timing was something Caleb had noted privately and found quietly satisfying. He pulled the door half closed and went downstairs. At 6:15, Leah texted, "I'm up. Want coffee before you go?" He looked at the message. He looked at the coffee already in his own mug. He thought about the fact that she was awake at 6:15 on a Friday and offering him coffee, and how naturally that fit into the morning, how unforced it felt, like a thing that had already been true for a while and was only now being acknowledged out loud. "Already made some," he typed back. "Go back to sleep." "I wasn't sleeping." "I know. Go anyway. Bossy. Efficient." A pause. Then, "Good luck today. Whatever today is." He set the phone down and drank his coffee standing at the kitchen counter in the dark. And he thought about what today might be. And he held it the same way he always held uncertainty, at arm's length, clearly without letting it grow into something bigger than the actual facts warranted. The actual facts were a briefing. Reyes. Something developing. That was all he had. That was all he would respond to. He rinsed his mug, put on his uniform, left the house at 6:50. The base was exactly as he'd left it, which was to say it was unchanged in the way that institutions are unchanged, solid and indifferent to whatever was happening in your personal life, which Caleb had always found more reassuring than people probably expected. There was something clarifying about a place that didn't care about your feelings. It focused you. He signed in, nodded to the petty officer at the gate who'd been there longer than some of Caleb's career, and walked to the briefing building with 7 minutes to spare. There were 6 other reserve officers in the room. He knew 3 of them well. He nodded. He sat. He waited. Commander Reyes came in at exactly 0900, which was the only time he ever entered any room exactly when he said he would not, a second earlier or later. He was a compact man in his mid-50s, gray at the temples, with the posture of someone who had decided decades ago that the world would accommodate his standards and had been proven right. He set a folder on the table and looked at the room. "Thank you all for being here," he said, which from Reyes meant this matters. "I'll be direct. We have a developing situation in the Pacific that requires us to assess reserve readiness for potential activated duty. I want to be clear, this is an assessment, not an order. No one in this room has received orders today." He paused. "What I need from each of you is an honest picture of your current situation. logistics family. Any conflicts that would complicate a 60 to 90-day activation if one were to come. The room was quiet in the particular way that rooms full of trained people are quiet, not from shock, but from processing. 60 to 90 days. Caleb looked at the table. He calculated automatically the same way he always did. Mrs. Calloway could manage school pickups. His sister in Phoenix could come if needed, though asking her was complicated. The resort job could wait. Gerald would probably be relieved honestly. The finances were solid enough. Zara. Zara was the calculation that didn't simplify. She'd been through 1 deployment. She'd been 4. She hadn't understood it as absence so much as a different texture of daily life. She was 7 now. She would understand it completely. The briefing moved through logistics regional context, the chain of what developing actually meant, which was serious but not imminent, which meant there was time, which meant Caleb was not walking out of this building onto a transport. He absorbed all of it with the same flat attention he brought to every technical briefing, his face giving nothing, his mind organizing everything into its correct column. When Reyes opened the floor, Caleb said what he always said, "I'll handle it, sir." Reyes looked at him with the particular expression of a man who had known Caleb Holt for 9 years. "You always say that, Holt." "It's always been true, sir." "I know." A pause. "How's the girl?" 7 and running a 1-person paleontology department. The corner of Reyes's mouth moved. "Good. Keep me updated on your readiness status. We'll know more in 2 weeks." "Understood." He drove home with both hands on the wheel and the radio off. 60 to 90 days. Not today. Maybe not at all. But the shape of it was real now, sitting in the passenger seat beside him, taking up space. He had known this was always possible. It was always possible. That was the deal he'd signed and re-signed, and signed again with his eyes open. But knowing something abstractly and feeling its specific weight in a specific week were 2 different things. He turned onto his street. Leah's car was in the driveway. She was home. He sat in his own driveway for a moment, engine off, and then he got out and crossed the street and knocked on her door. She opened it within a few seconds, which meant she'd heard the truck. She looked at him, at his uniform, at his face, at the particular set of his jaw that she had apparently learned to read because she stepped back immediately and said, "Come in." He came in. He sat on her couch. She sat in the chair across from him, angled toward him, and she waited. She didn't ask. She didn't fill the silence. She just waited with that quality of attention that he had come to understand was one of the most uncommon things a person could offer real, undemanding presence. "They're assessing us for potential activation," he said. 60 to 90 days. Pacific. Nothing's confirmed. 2 weeks until they know more." She nodded slowly. "Okay. I'm telling you because you're covering for me on Fridays, and I thought you should have the full picture." "I appreciate that," she said. And then carefully, "How are you?" He looked at her. "I'm fine." "Caleb." "Leah." "How are you actually?" He was quiet for a second. The honest answer moved around inside him, looking for a way out that wasn't going to make him feel exposed in a way he couldn't manage. He found one. "I don't love the timing," he said, "because of Zara." "Because of Zara." Leah leaned forward slightly, elbows on her knees. "How much does she understand about deployment, about what it means when you go?" "More than she did last time," he said. "She was 4. Now she's—" He stopped. "She'll understand it, and she'll handle it because that's who she is. But understanding it and handling it doesn't mean it won't cost her something." "No," Leah agreed. "It doesn't, and that's the part I can't fix." He said it evenly, but something underneath the evenness had a different quality. "I can arrange coverage. I can make sure every logistical piece is in place. I can call every morning and video every night. But I can't be there. And at 7 years old, there's only so much that phone calls cover." Leah was very still. "Tell me what you need," she said. He looked at her. "Not the logistics," she said. "You've got the logistics. You always have the logistics. Tell me what you actually need." It was the right question. It was also genuinely one of the harder questions he'd been asked, because the honest answer required him to step over a line he'd kept well back from for 3 years. The line that said, "You are enough on your own. You don't need to ask for this." "I need to know she's not going to feel alone," he said. If it happens. I need to know someone's watching, not just the pickups and the homework and the logistics. Watching her. The actual her. Leah held his gaze for a moment. I'll watch her, she said. Not because you're asking me to. Because she's Zara and I already am. He exhaled. Just once, just briefly. But it came from somewhere deep. I know, he said. You didn't have to ask. I know that too. He looked down at his hands. Asking is still hard. I know, she said. That's why it mattered that you did. He told Zara that evening, with the careful, direct honesty he'd always used with her, not softening it beyond recognition, not making it larger than it was. He sat on the edge of her bed, and he explained that his job in the Navy might call him away for a while, that it wasn't certain yet, that it might not happen at all, but that he wanted her to know because she deserved to know. She was quiet for longer than she usually was. She had Gerald the Triceratops in her lap, and she was turning it over in her hands the way she did when she was processing. Then she said, How long, 1, 2 months, maybe 3. She nodded. Like last time. Little longer than last time. She was quiet again. Then, will you call every day, every single day, even if you're busy? Especially if I'm busy. She turned Gerald over again. Is Miss Leah going to be around? He paused. Yeah, she is. Zara nodded slowly, and something in her expression settled just slightly, just enough. Okay, she said. Okay. I don't want you to go, she said clearly without drama, the way she said everything true. But I know you have to sometimes. That's your job. She looked at him. And you always come back. Always, he said. She held his gaze for a moment with those dark, sharp eyes that missed nothing. Promise. He put his hand on top of hers. Promise. She leaned against him, then just leaned her head against his arm. Gerald still in her hands. He put his arm around her, and they sat like that for a minute, not talking, the room quiet around them. Dad, she said. Yeah, baby. I think you should tell Miss Leah that you like her. He was very still. I mean, as a friend, Zara added in the tone of someone clarifying something that should be obvious. You always tell me to say things out loud when they're true because otherwise people don't know. He said nothing for a moment. When did I say that? He asked. When I didn't tell Marcus that I wanted him to be T-Rex and not me. You said people can't know what you want if you don't tell them. The context was different. The rule is the same, she said firmly. He looked at the top of her head. 7 years old. He had apparently raised a small, very specific philosopher and not fully appreciated the implications of that until this exact moment. Brush your teeth, he said. I'm right, though, she said, getting up. Teeth, Zara. Fine. She went to the bathroom. From behind the door. I'm right and you know it. He sat on the edge of the bed with his hands between his knees and the room very quiet around him. He was not going to think about what his 7-year-old had just told him to do. He was going to think about coverage plans and readiness assessments and the practical structure of the next 2 weeks. He sat there for another full minute. He was thinking about what Zara had said. Leah called him at 9:45 after Zara was asleep. He was on the porch because sometimes the night air was the right thing, and she knew he'd be there the same way she somehow knew most things about the shape of his evenings. How'd she take it? Leah asked. Better than she had any right to, he said. She asked if you'd be around. What did you say? I said yes. A pause. Good. Then, how are you taking it? He leaned back in this chair. I'm not taking it yet. It's not real yet. That's fair. Reyes said 2 weeks. So for 2 weeks I'm going to operate as if it's not happening, and then I'll respond to the actual facts. That's very you, she said. Is that a criticism? No, it's accurate. He could hear the smile in it. It's one of the things about you that makes you very functional and occasionally makes you very hard to read. I'm not hard to read. Caleb, you are famously hard to read. Gerald from the resort thought you liked him for 4 months. Gerald is oblivious. He is. But my point stands. She paused. Can I say something that might be direct? You have never once asked my permission to be direct. I'm trying something new. Another pause, and when she spoke again, the lightness was still there. But underneath it was something else, something that had weight. I know you're in the wait for the real information phase, and I respect that completely. But I also know that there's a part of this that's sitting on you right now tonight, and I don't want you to spend the next 2 weeks white-knuckling it alone while telling yourself you're fine. He didn't say anything. You have people, she said. You have me. You don't have to run this on your own internal resources until there's a decision. You're allowed to... She searched for the word. You're allowed to not be completely contained about it. The porch was quiet around him. Down the street, a dog was barking at something it had probably already forgotten about. I don't know how to do that, he said. It was the truest thing he'd said all day, and saying it felt like setting something heavy on the ground, not getting rid of it, just not carrying it for 1 second. I know, she said. That's why I'm saying it. So you know you can try. He looked out at the street, at the ordinary dark of an ordinary suburban night. His daughter was sleeping upstairs. Leah's voice was in his ear. The Navy was doing what the Navy does, and Caleb was doing what Caleb does, holding the line, maintaining the perimeter, managing the load. Leah, he said. Yeah. I'm glad you moved across the street 6 years ago. A beat of silence. Me too, she said. Her voice had changed slightly quieter, more careful. For what it's worth, I'm glad you were the one at the pool that morning. He didn't respond to that right away. He let it be what it was. How's the Oregon trip looking? He asked. I leave the 14th. She exhaled. I talked to my mom tonight. She cried. I don't think I realized how much she needed me to just say I was coming. People need to hear it, he said. Yeah. A pause. Where'd you get so wise about that? I have a 7-year-old who's been correcting my emotional blind spots since she could form complete sentences. Leah laughed, the real one, the good one. Tell her I said she's doing important work, she said. She'll want that in writing. I'll send a formal memo. He almost smiled. Get some sleep, Leah. You too. A pause. Caleb, whatever happens with the briefing, you're going to handle it. I know. And so is Zara. He looked at the dark street. I know that too, he said. That's the part that gets me. What do you mean? She'll handle it so well, he said. She's so much stronger than a 7-year-old should have to be, and some days that's the most heartbreaking thing about her. Silence. Yeah, Leah said softly. I understand that. He believed her. Good night, Leah. Good night, Caleb. He sat on the porch for another 20 minutes after the call ended, the phone in his lap, the night around him, the house behind him full of the sleeping quiet he'd built his entire world to protect. And something had changed. Not in the situation was the same. Reyes, the briefing, the 2 weeks, the uncertain shape of what came next. But something in him had moved. The same door that had shifted the night Leah walked out of his office, and he'd stood in the hallway choosing to say the true thing, it had moved again. A little more, a little further. Not open, but getting there. He went inside. He checked on Zara, still asleep, one arm around Gerald, peaceful in the total way that only children sleep. He stood in the doorway for a moment, the way he always did. You always come back, she'd said. Promise, promise. He pulled the door shut and went to bed, and for the first time in a week, he slept through to morning. The 2 weeks passed, the way waiting always passes too slowly when you were in it, and then suddenly, completely gone. Caleb got the call on a Thursday morning, 11 days after the briefing. He was in the middle of tightening a pool pump fitting at the resort. Gerald had finally approved the replacement part, 3 weeks late, with no acknowledgement that Caleb had been right, when his phone buzzed in his chest pocket, and he saw Reyes's name on the screen. He set the wrench down. He stood up. He answered. Holt. Sir. Stand down on the activation assessment. Situation's been resolved through other channels. Your status remains reserve. No further action required at this time. Caleb held the phone against his ear and looked at the surface of the pool. Still and blue and catching the morning light the same way it always did. Understood, sir, he said. Good man. We'll do a full debrief in 6 weeks. In the meantime, carry on. The call lasted 43 seconds. Caleb stood there for a moment with the phone in his hand. He waited to feel something large relief, maybe the kind that comes with exhaling after 2 weeks of held breath. Instead, what he felt was quieter than that, more settled. Like a weight he'd been holding at a careful distance had simply been set down by someone else's hand, and he was left standing in the space where it had been. He picked up the wrench. He finished the fitting. He texted Leah from the parking lot before he got in the truck. Stand down. Not happening. Her response came in under a minute. Oh, thank God. Are you okay? He thought about that. He checked himself the way he'd learned to honestly without the reflexive, I'm fine. That was more habit than truth. Yeah, he typed. Actually, yeah. Good. Zara's going to be relieved. I haven't told her yet. Tell her today. She's been carrying it. He sat with that for a second. He knew Zara had been carrying it. He'd seen it in the careful way she'd been extra helpful at dinner, extra settled at bedtime, the way she'd asked once very casually whether Oregon was near where the Navy went, and he'd known exactly what she was really asking. I'll tell her when she gets off the bus, he typed. Good. Also, I land back from Oregon at 7 p.m. tonight, in case you wanted to know. He did want to know. He had known the flight, actually. He'd checked it once, told himself he was just being logistically aware, and not examined that further. Safe flight, he typed. It was 4 days ago, Caleb. I'm already there. I'm coming home tonight. He stared at his phone. I know that, he typed. Safe flight home. Better. Then after a second, my mom says hi, by the way. I told her about you and Zara. He didn't know what to do with that information, so he started the truck and drove home. Chug. He was at the bus stop at 3:10. 2 minutes earlier than usual, parked in the second spot from the end engine off, windows down, because the afternoon had turned warm and dry in the way that only the desert could manage even this late in the season. The bus came. Zara got off in the middle of the group of kids, spotted the truck immediately. She always spotted it immediately, and her face did the thing. It always did the specific settling of relief that she didn't know he watched for, and she walked over and got in and buckled her seatbelt. Hey, she said. Hey, baby. She pulled her new library book out of her backpack, the Permian extinction one she'd had on reserve, and then stopped. She looked at him with those sharp eyes. What happened? She asked. Good news, he said. I'm not going anywhere. The Navy situation resolved. I'm staying. She was very still for exactly 3 seconds. Then she said, okay, in a voice that was slightly too controlled for a 7-year-old, which meant she was holding something together that wanted to come apart. Zara? I'm okay, she said. I know you are. He reached over and put his hand on top of her head gently. You want to say anything? She kept her eyes on the windshield. Her jaw was set, his jaw exactly. She was fighting the thing that was trying to happen in her face, the way he had fought things in his face for most of his adult life, and he felt it land in him like a stone. Baby, he said. You can say it. She turned and looked at him, and whatever she'd been holding broke open, not dramatically, not loudly, just quietly and completely the way real things break, and she said, I didn't want you to go, Dad, in a voice that was very small, and then she was crying, just for a moment. Just briefly, her face pressed into his shoulder and her hand gripping his sleeve. He held her. He didn't say anything. He didn't tell her it was okay, or that she should have told him, or that there was nothing to worry about. He just held her, his arm around her small frame, and let the moment be exactly what it was. After about a minute, she sat back up. She wiped her face with the back of her wrist. She looked at her library book. I'm glad you're not going, she said. Composure reinstated, moving on with the clean efficiency of a child who has finished feeling a thing and is ready to be done with it. Me too, he said. She opened the book. Can we have grilled cheese tonight? We can absolutely have grilled cheese tonight. Extra crispy. Always. She turned a page. He started the truck. And they drove home through the warm afternoon, and Caleb Holt felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, not just the absence of a particular weight, but an actual specific forward-facing lightness, and he let himself feel it without questioning where it came from, or what it meant, or whether he'd earned it. He knew where it came from. Leah's car was in this driveway at 7:20. He'd watched for it from the kitchen window, without meaning to. He was making dinner, moving between the counter and the stove. Not watching the window, just aware of the window in the particular way. You're aware of a thing you're pretending not to monitor, Zara noticed before he admitted he was looking. She was at the kitchen table, doing homework with the precision and personal resentment of someone who had better things to do, and she glanced out the window and said, "Miss Leah's home." "I see that," he said. "You should go say hi." "She just landed. Let her get in the door." "It's been 20 minutes. He looked at his daughter. "Homework," he said. She returned to her worksheet with the energy of someone being dramatically wronged. He turned back to the stove. He gave it another 10 minutes. He was making himself give it 10 more when a knock came at the front door. 3 knocks even-spaced, the way Leah always knocked, because everything she did had a particular rhythm to it. And Zara was already out of her chair before he'd turned the burner down. "I'll get it," she announced with a level of enthusiasm that made it entirely clear she had been waiting for exactly this development. Caleb heard the door open. He heard Zara's voice go up the way it did when she was genuinely, unreservedly happy to see someone. "Miss Leah, how was Oregon? How is your mom? Did you see the ocean?" And then Leah's voice, warm and a little tired from travel. "Oregon was good. My mom is good. And yes, I saw the ocean. She actually told me to say hi to a very specific 7-year-old paleontologist. She remembered. I told her a lot about you." He leaned in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, watching. Leah was in the entryway with her bag over one shoulder and her hair down from what had probably been a neat travel look 4 hours ago. She looked like someone who had done something important, and was still carrying the good weight of it. She looked like herself, but a version that had put something down somewhere over Oregon and come back a little lighter. She looked up and saw him. She held his gaze for a moment. "Hey," she said. "Hey," he said. "How's your mom?" "She's good." She said it the way you say something true that you're still getting used to being true. "She was scared to tell me how scared she was. We talked for 3 days straight." She paused. "The tests came back. It's manageable. Nothing catastrophic, just something to watch." "I'm glad you went," he said. "Me too." A pause. "I'm very glad I went." Zara tugged at Leah's sleeve. "Come have dinner. Dad made grilled cheese." Leah looked at him. "Did he?" "Extra crispy," Zara confirmed. "I can't think of a better thing to come home to," Leah said, and she meant the grilled cheese. She definitely meant the grilled cheese. But the way she said it, and the way she was looking at him when she said it, made the sentence carry more than its literal weight. And Caleb Holt uncrossed his arms and stepped back into the kitchen and said, "I'll add another sandwich." After dinner, after Zara had told Leah in complete detail about everything she'd been reading about the Permian extinction event and its relevance to current climate science after she'd been settled into bed with Gerald and her book, and the specific lamp angle she required, not the overhead, just the lamp and angled left, not right, because right made shadows that looked like Gerald was a different dinosaur. Caleb came back downstairs and found Leah on the porch. She'd stepped out while he was doing the bedtime routine. She was in the chair he usually sat in, which he noticed and chose not to mention, and she was looking at the street the way he usually did, just letting the night settle around her. He came out and stood with his back against the porch rail facing her. She looked up. "Thank you," she said, "for tonight, for all of it, the weeks." She looked back at the street. "You kept the door open for me to walk back into." "You didn't need me to do that," he said. "You'd have walked back in anyway." "Maybe." She glanced at him. "But it's different when someone's holding it." He was quiet for a moment. "How was it with your mom, really?" Leah exhaled slowly. "Hard. In the way it's hard when you realize someone you love has been holding something alone because they didn't want to worry you, and you've been doing the same thing in the other direction." She turned the bracelet on her wrist, something she did when she was working through something. "We sat on her porch for 3 hours the first night. Just talked. About things we'd been orbiting for years without landing on." She paused. "She told me she worries I work too much and don't let people in." He said nothing. "Which is..." Leah laughed, a little quiet and self-aware. "Which is accurate," I know it's accurate. I've known it for a while. She looked at him directly. She also said that the way I talked about you and Zara, she said you sounded like someone worth letting in. The porch was very still. She's never met me, he said. She's my mother. She's met you through me. Leah held his gaze. And I talk about you more than I realized, apparently. Caleb shifted against the railing. He looked at the street. Leah, he said, you don't have to say anything. I know. I want to. He was quiet for a second, finding the words, not the right words. He'd never been good at right words, but the true ones, which were the only kind he'd ever known how to use. I've been watching myself for 3 years, being careful, building the right structure, keeping everything inside the lines I drew after the divorce. He paused. I told myself it was for Zara, and it was partly. But it was also because being careful meant I didn't have to risk anything. And not risking anything meant I didn't have to feel anything I couldn't manage. Leah was very still. And then some bracket at a resort pool broke, he said. And you said 3 words in a voice I'd never heard you use before. And something in the whole structure. He stopped. Something moved. She was watching him with the full, open attention she'd given him that first day in her office. The kind that didn't flinch. What moved? She asked. The part of me that was still there, he said. Under all the structure. That still wanted... He looked at her. That still wanted to be seen by someone. Not managed, not handled, seen. The silence between them was the fullest kind. I see you, she said. I know. He said it simply without decoration. That's why I'm saying it. She stood up then, out of the chair, and she was close to him, in the way she'd been in the kitchen that first evening, close enough that the careful distance he'd kept for 3 years had nowhere left to stand, and she looked at him with those steady, honest eyes. So, what do you want to do about it? She asked. Not a test, not a trap, just the question direct and real the way Leah asked everything. He looked at her. I want to stop treating it like a problem to manage, he said, and start treating it like the actual thing it is. Which is, I don't know yet, he said, but I know it's worth finding out. She nodded slowly. That's honest. It's all I've got. It's enough. She held his gaze for one more moment, the kind of moment that gets remembered later. Not for what was said, but for what was decided quietly and completely between 2 people who were done pretending they were only neighbors. And then she said, I should let you get some sleep. Yeah. She moved a step past him toward the door. Then she stopped her hand on the doorframe, and she looked back at him over her shoulder. Caleb. Yeah. For the record, I wasn't just asking you not to leave the pool that morning. She said it simply no performance in it. I think you knew that. He had known that. Good night, Leah, he said. She smiled, slow reel, the one that meant she was all the way in it. Good night. She went back inside. He heard her footsteps cross his kitchen, heard her voice call something soft and familiar in the direction of the stairs, and then the front door opened and closed, and she was gone across the street, and the night settled back into its ordinary quiet. He stayed on the porch for a while. He thought about the bracket, the towel, the 3 words barely audible over pool water on a Tuesday morning. He thought about parking lots and hardware stores and kitchen counters and the specific gravity of a phone call that resolves in 43 seconds. He thought about his daughter telling him with complete 7-year-old authority that people can't know what you want if you don't tell them, and how she'd been right, and how she was almost always right, and how he'd spent 3 years thinking the life he'd built was complete, when really it had just been safe. Safe wasn't the same as whole. He'd known that for a while. He just hadn't been ready to do anything about the difference. He was ready now. The next morning, Saturday, he made pancakes instead of eggs, because Zara had declared on Wednesday that Saturday was a pancake day, and he'd agreed without negotiating, which meant the precedent had been set and was now apparently permanent. She came down at 7:30 in her pajamas, hair in every direction Gerald tucked under one arm, and she sat at the table and looked at the pancakes and said, Did you make the blueberry ones or the plain ones? Blueberry, he said. She nodded like this was correct. She reached for the syrup. Is Miss Leah coming over today? She asked. I don't know yet. You should ask her. I might. You should definitely ask her. She poured syrup with intense concentration. She's good here. She fits. He put a plate in front of her. Where'd you get that idea? He asked. She looked up at him with the absolute confidence of someone who has never once doubted the reliability of their own perceptions. I've known it for a long time, Dad. I was waiting for you to catch up. He sat down across from her. He looked at his daughter, this small, complete, extraordinary person who had come out of the hardest years of his life and become the best thing in it, and he felt the full weight of everything. Not the heavy kind, the other kind. The kind that means this matters. All of it. Even the hard parts. Especially the hard parts. Yeah, he said. I'm catching up. She ate her pancakes. He ate his. Outside the kitchen window, the morning was bright and unhurried, and across the street, Leah Monroe's car sat in the driveway, and the curtains in her front room were open, which meant she was up, which meant she was starting the morning, the same way they were on the same street, inside the same quiet Saturday. Later that morning, he texted her pancakes. If you haven't eaten, phew. She came over in 12 minutes with coffee she'd already made because that was Leah. She didn't show up empty-handed, and she didn't make you ask twice. Zara scooted over to make room at the table without being asked, and the three of them sat there in Caleb's kitchen on a Saturday morning, pancakes going cold because the talking was better. Zara holding court on the Permian extinction with an audience that was now fully and willingly invested, and Leah catching Caleb's eye over the top of his daughter's head with a look that said something that didn't need words, something that was just simply cleanly, undeniably there. And Caleb Holt, Navy man, single father, the man who had turned away at the pool and held out a towel and stayed exactly where he was until someone else was okay. He smiled, not the almost smile, not the managed version, the real one. And it turned out that was the whole thing. Not the grand gesture, not the dramatic declaration, not anything that required the right words at the right moment. It was a Saturday morning. It was pancakes. It was a 7-year-old talking about mass extinction events like it was urgent news. It was the particular way a person looks at you when they have decided somewhere quiet and permanent in themselves that you are worth being present for. It was the sound of a door one that had been closed for 3 years carefully and deliberately, and for good reasons, opening all the way in the most ordinary possible moment, letting the light in without any ceremony at all. Some things don't need an announcement. They just need a man who's finally ready to stop looking away.